I never imagined that my neighbor would turn my driveway into her personal fueling station. But here we are. A lake owner dreads erosion, a gardener dreads drought, and me, I recently faced every electric vehicle owner's worst nightmare. Someone yanking my car's lifeline to feed their own. That's how it started. The HOA president herself, Karen Freeman, stealthily unplugging my charger and feeding her car with it like she was entitled to a public utility. And her excuse? Yours won't mind, mine's on the fritz. The only thing truly broken, of course, was her sense of boundaries. Her entitled grin froze when I pulled out receipts later. But let me rewind to where this battle began. My name is Evan Cole. I'm an engineer, which means this. I thrive on systems that actually work, rules that have teeth, structures that stay upright. My life was organized, a tidy duplex with every tool labeled and my level 2 charger bolted properly by the book. Nothing fancy, nothing sloppy. A good, predictable rhythm. Until Karen moved in. Karen Freeman wore her HOA presidency like a crown. The beige queen, determined to run our block with polish on top and claws underneath. She led with appearances first, empathy somewhere far down her checklist. She drove the shinier Tesla, the one a model year beyond mine, and strutted around bragging about our community commitment to sustainable futures. Green initiatives, weekly emails, speeches baked into her re-election campaign. All talk until the night her showmanship started costing me money. It was midnight on some forgotten Tuesday when I got the notification. Bright phone screen in the dark. Charging interrupted. My app, which usually hums me to sleep with the reassuring message that my car is quietly sipping power for tomorrow, suddenly pinged me awake. No outage. No storm. Just unplugged. I rubbed my eyes, peered down at the driveway. My heart knocked once, then dropped. My car? Dark screen, loose cord dangling like a cut vein. And there, angled bold as brass. Karen's white Tesla, plugged into my charger, charging from my house. The black cable slithered straight from my box into her car as if the concrete itself had sprouted a snake. My electricity, feeding her battery. For a long beat, I just stood at the window in disbelief. She hadn't even asked. This wasn't oops, wrong outlet. This wasn't we're in a pinch. It was deliberate theft, committed with corporate smoothness and neighborhood hypocrisy by the woman who writes monthly sermons about civility. I yanked on jeans, shrugged into a hoodie, and stalked outside. The cool night air clung tight, filled with the faint hum from my charger pumping life into her Tesla. My charger. My hum. I walked up, tapped on her driver's window. She jumped, eyes wide. The mask cracked just long enough to flash her fear. Then within seconds, the mask slid back on. Calm, glossy arrogance, as if she were granting me an audience. She lowered the window an inch. Evan, she purred, smooth velvet over steel. Something wrong? I pointed to the cable. Kept it simple. She followed my finger, produced the smallest of smiles. Oh, must be a misunderstanding. That's my charger, Karen, I said. Her smile never flinched. Mine's out of order. Big meeting tomorrow. I'll just use yours tonight. You won't mind. The words were so casual, so blithe. Like she thought my property line was written in pencil and she had the eraser. What really lit me up wasn't the theft itself. It was the assumption, the certainty that I wouldn't notice, or that if I did, I wouldn't dare make a fuss. That my effort, my utility bill, existed as overflow for her convenience. Had she asked, I might have understood, explained it, maybe even agreed if it was a one-time deal. But this, no warning, no permission, just bold entitlement. I did notice, I said evenly, and I need you to unplug. Now. I walked to the charger, thumbed the release, and pulled the handle free. The hum died. Silence pressed down like a held breath. She narrowed her eyes. There's no need to be so hostile. We're neighbors. We should help each other. I coiled the cable back in place, deliberately neat. Unplugging my vehicle at midnight to power yours isn't helping, Karen. It's stealing. For once, she didn't have a script. Her mouth pressed into a line. I locked the handle into its cradle, returned her stare. This charger is for my car, not yours. Don't use it again, the air bristled. Sarah, my wife, had stirred inside during the exchange. By the time I came back in, she knew from my face exactly what had happened. She can't be serious, she muttered when I explained. But both of us knew it wasn't over. Sure enough, next morning Sarah put it plainly. If you just let this go, she'll see your decency as weakness. And she'll push again. She stirred her latte with quick little circles, more force in her hand than necessary. She was right. Locks don't solve entitlement. And Karen wasn't a problem you fix once. She was a system failure, a bug that needed its own patch. That's when I called Larry, my electronics guy. Larry, who thrives on pettiness disguised as genius. He didn't hesitate. Pizza, and I'm in. That weekend, over greasy cardboard blueprints, we drafted our plan. Not brute force. Not violence. Elegance. We would turn her arrogance into evidence. We bought a weatherproof steel enclosure, heavy as a safe, welded shut except for the access point, fitted with a smart lock linked to my phone. Cameras installed. One tucked beneath the eave, eye wide, watching everything. And the masterpiece, Larry's reroute. A Raspberry Pi wired to a diverter inside the box. When Karen inevitably plugged in, her console would glow green, smug in the illusion of charging. In reality, the data logger would record every second, every watt phantom fed by my Powerwall, uploaded to a cloud log beyond tampering. We posted bold warnings outside the box, legal disclaimers, large stickers, high visibility under surveillance sign. We gave her every chance to walk away, but arrogance blinds cleverness. We knew she'd think it was all bluff. Padlock, stickers, the works. The decoy padlock was pure bait. $10 of cheap steel designed for a moment of smug satisfaction when she popped it. The smart mechanism was hidden within, untouchable without a code. By the time we finished, Larry stepped back, wiping his hands. "It's a masterpiece of petty engineering," he declared, clapping me on the shoulder. "She won't just get caught. She'll hang herself with the rope she thinks she stole." Sarah was less enthused. "Are you sure provoking her isn't dangerous? What if she escalates?" "That's the point," I said. "Let her step forward. I'll meet her with proof." And so the trap sat quietly, bait shining in the moonlight. All that remained was patience. It didn't take long. Thursday, 1 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion alert. Heart pounding steady, I opened the feed. And there she was, Karen Freeman, in black hoodie and yoga pants, suburban ninja silhouette crossing my driveway. She carried herself with purpose, not shame. She strode up to the box with a flashlight, scanning the signage. Read every word deliberately. For a long moment she stood frozen, calculating. Then came that smile. The smile that said rules are for lesser people. She reached into her designer purse and retrieved a slim lockpick tool, smirking at my meager padlock. She crouched, fiddled. The lock popped with a soft click. Her expression bloomed smug and victorious, as though she had disarmed Fort Knox. She swung open the steel door. Inside, resting in a custom cradle, was the charger handle. Looked perfect, untouched. She pulled it out, dragged the cord to her car, plugged it in. With a triumphant thunk, the light on her Tesla flipped green. Full charge, she thought. I sat at my kitchen table, watching the live feed, recording every frame. Karen Freeman closed the door, clicked the fake padlock shut, and slid back into her seat with the strut of a thief who thinks she'd cracked the world's code. She was so pleased with herself. She didn't know she had just pressed record on her own downfall. She was so clever. She unlatched the heavy steel door and swung it open. Inside, nestled in its custom cradle, was my EV charger handle. It looked completely normal. She grabbed it, pulled out the length of cable, and plugged it into her car with a satisfying thunk. The little light on her charging port blinked, and then turned solid green. She was charging, or so she thought. I watched, mesmerized, as she closed the steel box, clicked the useless padlock shut, and walked back to her car with the swagger of a master thief who had just cracked a bank vault. She shut her door, checked the street, and walked home, leaving her car tethered to my charger. She'd be back before dawn to slip it loose. The audacity was breathtaking. As soon as she was gone, I switched from the camera feed to my data log. The screen filled with numbers that made my heart sing. The log showed a new entry time stamp to the exact second she plugged in. It registered the connection, and then a second entry popped up. My Powerwall battery, which was at 60% capacity, had just started drawing power from the grid at a rate of 7.2 kilodollars, the exact speed her car would have been charging at. On her end, her car's computer would be getting a tiny trickle of voltage, just enough to keep that green light on and report that all systems were go. But all the real power, the electricity she was trying to steal, was flowing directly into my battery backup system. She was literally triggering my house to charge on my dime, and I was logging every attempt. I sat back in my chair, a wide grin spreading across my face. It worked. It worked perfectly. She had read the warnings, seen the lock, and her arrogance had told her she was smarter than all of it. She hadn't just fallen for the trap. She had swan-dived into it. I saved the video clip, naming it Karen Returns, Mug Grin, MP4. I took a screenshot of the data log showing the power diversion. This was receipt number 1. I knew there would be more. This was no longer just a simple case of theft. This was a game. And she had just made her move, thinking she was taking my queen, when in reality, She had just walked her king right into my perfectly engineered checkmate. She thought she had won this round. But the truth was, she had just started filling my battery. And I couldn't wait to see how much free energy she was willing to give me before she finally figured it out. For the next 3 nights, the pattern held. Just after midnight, she'd plug in and leave the car tethered, slip back at dawn to unplug and vanish, then repeat the next night. Each time, my cameras recorded her, and my data logger dutifully tracked the kilowatts she was gifting to my home battery. My power wall had never been so consistently full. Larry and I had a running text thread where I'd send him the nightly updates. He was ecstatic. "We're running a Karen-fueled power plant," he texted back after the 3rd night. "This is the greenest energy source I've ever seen." The evidence was piling up into a beautiful, undeniable mountain. I had multiple high-define video clips, each time stamped. I had precise logs showing every watt being diverted. I had everything I needed to go to the HOA board or even the police. But something held me back. It felt incomplete. Thetrap was working perfectly from a technical standpoint, but it was missing a certain flair. It was too subtle. She was being fooled, yes, but she wasn't aware that she was being fooled. Her smug satisfaction remained intact, and for a crime born of such pure arrogance, that just didn't seem like a fitting punishment. The line between law and revenge, which I had been walking so carefully, started to get a little blurry. I wasn't thinking about restitution anymore. I was thinking about revelation. I wanted a moment of pure, unadulterated aha when she realized how thoroughly she had been outsmarted. "It needs a punchline," I told Sarah one evening, showing her the latest video of Karen's routine. "Right now, it's a great setup, but there's no joke at the end." Sarah, who had been watching this whole saga with a mix of horror and amusement, tapped her chin thoughtfully. "Well, what's the one thing she cares about more than anything?" "Her image," I said instantly. "Her perfect, pristine, I have it all together image." "Exactly," Sarah said. "So the punchline can't be quiet. It has to be something that messes with that image. Something theatrical, but not destructive. Nothing that can get you in actual trouble." That's when the idea, another beautiful and petty idea, began to sparkle in my mind. The next day, I was back in Larry's garage. I laid out my new proposal. "We need to add a payload," I said. "Stage 2. Larry's eyes lit up with the fire of 1,000 mad scientists. "I like where this is going. What kind of payload are we talking about?" "Non-harmful," I said, stressing the words. "Non-damaging, just surprising and sparkly." We spent the afternoon devising the upgrade. We added a buzzer and a harmless glitter puff timed 3 seconds after plug-in. I swept up the evidence, reset the trap, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. That very night, just before 2 a.m., the motion alert went off. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open like a kid on Christmas Eve. Sarah was beside me, a bowl of popcorn between us. "Showtime," she whispered. The live feed showed Karen pulling up. She got out of her car and went through the same smug routine. Picked the dummy lock, opened the box, grabbed the charger. She walked it over to her car, lined up the port, and pushed it in. The green light on her car blinked on. 1, 2, 3 beep. The shriek of the buzzer cut through the silent night air, sharp and painful, even through the laptop speakers. Simultaneously, a dense cloud of purple and silver glitter erupted from the bottom of the steel box, shooting straight downwards and then billowing outwards, catching the light of the street lamp in a dazzling, chaotic storm. Karen yelped and jumped back, dropping the charging handle. She was standing right in the blast zone. The glitter cloud enveloped her from the waist down, coating her dark yoga pants in a thick layer of shimmering particles. She frantically batted at her legs, but it was no use. She was sparkling. She looked around wildly, her face a mask of pure confusion and fury. She stared at the charger, then at the box, as if she couldn't comprehend what had just happened. The buzzer continued its relentless shriek for another 10 seconds before cutting off, leaving an echoing silence. Sarah and I were trying so hard not to laugh that we were both shaking. Tears were streaming down my face. Karen, now thoroughly glitter-bombed and enraged, ripped the charger out of her car, threw it on the ground, and slammed the steel box shut. She didn't even bother with the lock. She stomped back to her car, leaving a faint trail of sparkles on the asphalt, and sped off down the street. I saved the video clip as Karen Glitter's surprise, MPP4. This was no longer just about logging data. This was about creating a spectacle. I had found my punchline. But as I watched her car disappear, a new thought entered my mind. A person like Karen Freeman doesn't respond to humiliation by backing down. They respond by escalating. The prank was over, and I had a feeling the real fight was just about to begin. The glitter bomb was a declaration of war. I knew it, and Sarah knew it. The quiet, technical battle of wits was over. For 2 days there was an eerie silence. No late-night visits. No angry emails from the HOA. Just the faint, sparkly residue on my driveway as a reminder of my little victory. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, the sheer weirdness of the glitter attack had been enough to scare her off for good. I should have known better. The escalation came on Saturday afternoon. I was in the garage cleaning up my workbench when I heard a heavy knock on the side door that leads to the driveway. It wasn't a polite, neighborly knock. It was a loud, insistent banging. I opened the door to find 2 people standing there. One was Karen, her arms crossed, her face set in a mask of cold fury. The other was a man I'd never seen before. He was big. Not just tall, but wide, with a thick neck and hands that looked like they could crush a cinder block. He was wearing a tight-fitting polo shirt that strained against his biceps, and a scowl that looked permanent. "Evan," Karen said, her voice dripping with venom. "This is my brother-in-law, Rick. He wanted to have a word with you about your little games." Rick stepped forward, crowding my personal space. He was a good 6 and taller than me and outweighed me by at least 80 lb. He was clearly here for one reason: intimidation. "So, you're the guy?" He grunted, looking down at me. "You think it's funny to harass my sister-in-law, rigging up some kind of trap to spray her with stuff?" "I think it's funny when people who steal my electricity get a little surprise," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I wasn't going to let them see it. I made Sugar stand right in the doorway, my body blocking the entrance to my garage. This was my space. "That's a serious accusation," Karen snapped. "You have no proof." "Oh, I have proof," I said, looking directly at her. "I have lots of it. Dates, times, high-define video. Would you like me to start airdropping the files to your phone? Right now?" Her eyes flickered with a brief moment of panic before the anger returned. Rick took another step forward, so close I could smell the cheap cologne coming off him. "Listen to me," he said, lowering his voice into what he probably thought was a threatening growl. "You're going to take that stupid box off your wall, and you're going to stop harassing her. You're going to forget any of this ever happened, understand?" This was the classic bully playbook. When you can't win with logic, you win with threats. I took a small step back, not in fear, but to create a clear threshold at my doorway. "I'm not taking anything down," I said firmly, "and I'm not forgetting anything. Your sister-in-law is a thief, and you," I said, looking Rick dead in the eye, "are on my property. I'd like you to leave." Rick scoffed. "I'll leave when I'm good and ready." He then made a critical mistake. He reached out and shoved me hard in the chest. It wasn't a huge shove, but it was enough to knock me back a step over the threshold and into my own garage. And in that instant, everything changed. It was no longer a verbal confrontation. It was a physical assault on my property. My protective instincts kicked into high gear. I didn't shove back. I didn't raise my voice. I simply raised my hand, palm out, and said in a clear, loud voice, "Do not touch me again. You have just assaulted me, and you are officially trespassing. I am ordering you to leave my property immediately inside the house." Sarah had heard the commotion. She had already done what we had agreed she would do if things ever escalated. She called the police. I could hear her on the phone in the kitchen, her voice calm and clear as she gave our address. Rick seemed taken back by my formal tone. He was expecting a fight, not a legal declaration. "Or what?" he sneered, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice now. "Or the police who are already on their way will remove you." I said that got his attention and Karen's. Her face went pale. This was not how she had envisioned this going. Her attempt at a show of force was backfiring spectacularly. "You called the cops?" she hissed, grabbing Rick's arm. "Are you insane? Assault and trespassing are crimes, Karen," I said. Or is that another rule that only applies to other people? Rick, realizing he was about to be in a very awkward conversation with law enforcement, finally seemed to get the message. He let Karen pull him back down the driveway. They stood there for a moment, whispering furiously to each other. I didn't retreat. I stayed in the doorway of my garage, watching them. The threshold was mine. One more step and it'd be criminal trespass. I wanted them to know I wasn't scared, and I wasn't. Backing down. A few minutes later, a police cruiser rolled silently down the cul-de-sac and pulled up to the curb. The confrontation I had been expecting was finally here, but not on her terms. It was on mine. The officer who got out was calm, professional, and looked like he'd seen it all. He listened to my side of the story first. I explained the ongoing theft, the decoy system, and the confrontation that had just occurred, emphasizing the shove. Then he went to talk to Karen and Rick. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Karen's wild gesticulations and Rick's sullen, defensive posture. After a few minutes, the officer came back to me. He admits he pushed you, the officer said. He claims you were threatening his sister-in-law. I told him to get off my property, I replied. The only threat I made was to show her the video evidence of her stealing from me. The officer nodded. Given that he admits to the physical contact and you want him off your property, I can issue him a formal trespass warning. If he sets foot on your property again, he can be arrested. Do you want to press charges for the assault? I thought about it for a moment. Pressing charges would turn this into a much bigger legal battle. My goal wasn't to put this meathead in jail. My goal was to stop Karen. The trespass warning was enough. It was an official documented consequence. It was another receipt. The trespass warning is fine for now, I said. I just want them to leave me alone. The officer walked back over, had a stern word with Rick, and handed him a slip of paper. Rick snatched it, shot me a hateful glare, and got into Karen's car. They drove away without another word. The officer gave me an incident number and told me to call if they came back. As he was leaving, he paused. A glitter bomb, huh? He said, a small smile playing on his lips. That's a new one. Just be careful, okay? People like that can be unpredictable. I nodded and thanked him. As I closed the garage door, the adrenaline finally started to fade, replaced by a cold resolve. She had tried to intimidate me. She had brought a thug to my door. She had crossed a lien. A big one. This was no longer a petty dispute between neighbors. She had made it a police matter. And if she wanted to play with official consequences, I had a folder full of evidence that would give her more consequences than she could ever imagine. The game had changed again, and she had just handed me a whole new set of rules to play by. The trespass warning was a clear line drawn in the sand, but I knew Karen wasn't the type to respect boundaries. In fact, the police involvement seemed to have made her even more desperate. The next move was hers, and it was a predictable one. 2 days after the incident with her brother-in-law, another police car pulled up in front of my duplex. This time, however, they came straight to my door. 2 officers looking very serious. My heart sank a little. This was it. This was her counterattack. Evan Cole, the senior officer asked. I confirmed it was me. Sir, we've received a complaint from one of your neighbors, a Ms. Karen Freeman. He began, his tone neutral. She's alleging that you have constructed an illegal and hazardous device on your property. She claims it damaged her vehicle's charging system, and that you're harassing her by aiming security cameras at her home. I had to give her credit. It was a clever angle. She was trying to flip the script to paint me as the villain and her as the victim. She was using the system against me, but I was an engineer. I anticipated this. I had prepared for it. Officers, please come in, I said calmly, stepping aside. I'd be happy to show you everything. I've been meticulously documenting Ms. Freeman's activities for the past several weeks. I led them into my living room where I had my laptop ready. Sarah gave me a reassuring nod from the kitchen. I had walked her through this exact scenario. First, I addressed the camera issue. I brought up the live feed on my laptop. As you can see, the camera is mounted on my property, I explained, pointing to the screen. I've also masked any angles that would face down the street. It does not in any way show Miss Freeman's property, which is down the street. I even brought up a satellite map view to show the angles. The officers seemed satisfied with that. It was a clear-cut case of a security camera monitoring the owner's property, which is perfectly legal. Okay, the officer said. Now, about this device, she mentioned. Yes, the hazardous device, I said, a small smile touching my lips. Let me show you. It's in my garage. I led them through the house to the garage where I had the steel enclosure open for inspection. Larry and I had been fastidious in our construction, making sure everything was up to code, clean, and professional looking. There were no loose wires, no exposed contacts. Everything was properly grounded and shielded. This is a standard UL listed level 2 EV charger. I began my presentation. It's the same kind you'd find anywhere. All I have done is put it inside this protective steel case. The modification is here. I pointed to the load diverter and the Raspberry Pi. This is a low-voltage system completely isolated from the high-voltage charging circuit. It does two things. First, it logs all activity. Second, it diverts the power load. When an unauthorized user plugs in, the system doesn't draw power for the car. Instead, it signals my home battery to charge. The car itself receives less than 1 watt of power, just enough to trick its computer into thinking it's charging. The EVS itself is U-listed. Our low-voltage control is isolated and never delivers traction power and cannot harm a vehicle. In fact, it's safer than a regular charger because it's not actually delivering any significant power. I then pulled out a binder. I'm an engineer. I believe in binders. Inside were the schematics for our design, the spec sheets for every component we used, and a printed-out copy of the local electrical code sections pertaining to EV chargers with the relevant parts highlighted. I handed it to the senior officer. He flipped through it, his eyebrows rising slightly. "You certainly did your homework," he commented. "I believe in doing things by the book," I said. Now for the harassment claim, I turned back to my laptop, which I had brought into the garage. This all started several weeks ago when I caught Miss Freeman stealing electricity from me in the middle of the night. I clicked open a folder on my desktop labeled Receipts. Inside were neatly organized video files. I played the first one, the initial confrontation where I politely asked her to stop. Then I played the second one, her returning with the latch tool, picking the dummy lock, and looking so proud of herself. I showed them clip after clip of her trespassing on my property night after night. Finally, I played the glitter bomb video. The so-called trap she mentioned was a Poe electric buzzer and a puff of craft glitter, I explained. Annoying, yes, theatrical, absolutely, but completely harmless. It was designed to scare her off without causing any damage. The final piece of my presentation was the data log. I brought up a color-coded spreadsheet. "And this," I said, "is the log of every time she has plugged into my charger since I installed the monitoring system. As you can see, on this night she was plugged in for 7 hours. My system diverted 50.4 kWh of energy to my home battery. At the current utility rate of 18 cents per kWh, she attempted to steal just over $9 worth of electricity that night alone." I showed them the totals. By my calculations, she attempted over $70 in power since the trap, and actually took a few dollars before I locked it down. The officers were silent, looking from the spreadsheet to the video clips and back again. The narrative she had spun for them was completely unraveling, being replaced by a mountain of cold, hard data. "Sir," the senior officer said, handing me back my binder, "it seems the situation is the exact opposite of what was reported to us." "That's what I've been trying to tell you." I said, "She's the one harassing me. She's the one trespassing. She even sent her brother-in-law to my home to physically intimidate me, which your colleague issued a trespass warning for 2 days ago." The officer's eyes widened slightly. He clearly hadn't been aware of that incident report. He made a note on his pad. He looked at his partner, who just shook his head in disbelief. "Mr. Nicole, I apologize for taking up your time," the senior officer said, his tone having shifted from professional neutrality to something approaching collegial respect. "You have nothing to worry about from us. You're well within your rights. In fact, you have more than enough evidence here to file a criminal complaint for theft of services and repeated trespassing." I nodded. "She took power that first night before the enclosure. Since then, it's been attempted theft and trespass. I've got both on video." He handed me his card. "If you choose to do that, give me a call. And if she or anyone else bothers you again, you call 911 immediately." They walked back to their car, but not before stopping to have another much longer conversation with Karen, who had been watching the whole scene from her front porch down the street. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see her sputtering, defensive posture. I saw the officer point at my house, then at her, his expression stern. He was laying down the law. As they drove away, Karen shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. I had won. I had used logic, documentation, and the law itself to completely dismantle her attack. I had turned her own weapon against her. But that look she gave me, it told me something important. This wasn't just about a charger anymore. This was about her re-election. Her entire public persona was built on being the perfect green, rule-abiding community leader. I wasn't just a nuisance. I was a direct threat to that image. And with the HOA debate night and the election just a week away, I knew her desperation would reach a critical new level. The stakes were about to get much, much higher. The police visit was a decisive victory for me, but it also painted a giant target on my back. I had publicly embarrassed Karen Freeman in front of law enforcement. For a woman obsessed with her image, especially with an election looming, this was an unforgivable sin. I knew her next move wouldn't be direct. She was too clever for that. She would use the system she controlled, the HOA. But something else happened first. Something that raised the stakes for her personally, and explained the root of her desperation. A few days after the police visit, I saw an official-looking van from the city's Department of Building and Safety pull up in front of Karen's house. An inspector got out with a clipboard and spent a long time looking at the side of her house, right where her own EV charger was supposed to be. I may or may not have made an anonymous tip to the city about potentially unpermitted electrical work in our neighborhood. I simply suggested they might want to check the public records for recent permits, particularly for high amperage installations like EV chargers. It was a matter of public safety, after all. I watched from my window as the inspector talked with Karen. Her arms were waving, her face a mixture of feigned charm and barely concealed panic. It didn't work. Before the inspector left, he slapped a big bright red tag on the outlet, a stop work order. It meant the installation was illegal, unsafe, or both. Her DIY charger installation, the one she had probably paid a handyman under the table to do, had been officially condemned. This was the missing piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just that her charger was on the fritz as she had claimed. It was that she had cut corners, got caught, and now her only way to charge her car, the ultimate symbol of her green campaign platform, was out of commission indefinitely. Without a functioning home charger, her image as a forward-thinking, eco-conscious leader would crumble. Her only option had been to steal from me. Now with the red tag visible to the entire neighborhood, her desperation was on public display, and that made her even more dangerous. The official HOA letter arrived the next day. It was delivered by certified mail, a classic power move. The envelope was thick with self-importance. Inside was a formal notice of violation. According to the letter signed by Karen in her capacity as HOA president, I was in breach of 3 separate bylaws. First, I had erected an unapproved structure on my property referring to the steel box. Second, I had affixed unauthorized signage referring to my warning signs. Third, and this was the most ludicrous, I was creating a public nuisance with my security system, citing the auditory disturbance of the buzzer. The letter informed me that I had 7 days to remove the enclosure, the signs, and the noise-making device, or I would face a daily fine of $100, followed by a lien on my property. It was a declaration of total war using the full bureaucratic weight of the HOA. She couldn't beat me with facts or intimidation, so she was going to try and bury me in paperwork and fines. I read the letter, and I didn't feel angry. I felt energized. This was the opening I had been waiting for. She had finally put her attack in writing. It was an official document, an abuse of her power, and it was my ticket to the main event. The annual HOA meeting, which included the candidate debate and the election, was in 4 days. My plan had been to simply attend and vote against her. But this letter changed everything. Now, I wasn't just going to vote, I was going to speak. I spent the next 2 days preparing, not like a homeowner, but like an engineer preparing for a critical design review. I went through the HOAs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The CC and RS, with a fine-tapped structure, was a utility box, which was explicitly permitted. The unauthorized signage fell under the category of security warnings, which were also permitted. And the public nuisance claim was absurd. The buzzer had gone off once at 2 a.m. on my own property in response to a criminal act. It's inside a sealed box under 10 seconds and audible mainly on my lot. Her case was tissue paper thin, and I was about to set it on fire. But I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to present my own case. I compiled all my evidence into a single devastating presentation. I edited the video clips into a short, compelling timeline. I turned the data logs into easy-to-read charts and graphs that showed the dates, times, and dollar amounts of the attempted thefts. I scanned the police incident report for the trespass warning and the official letter of violation she had sent me. I put it all together in a PowerPoint file, a weapon of mass bureaucracy. The centerpiece of my presentation was the glitter bomb video. I even added a slow-motion replay, but I needed a grand finale. I scrubbed through the hours of audio my camera had recorded. I post-NAV recording and used notice on my gate, clear on my property. Mostly it was just wind and passing cars. But then I found it. On the 3rd night of her borrowing, Karen had been on her phone while plugging in my charger. She was complaining to someone, probably her husband or a friend. Her voice was crystal clear in the night air. "I don't know what's wrong with this thing," she'd grumbled into her phone, referring to my decoy charger. "It says it's charging, but my battery level is barely moving. It feels like you're sucking my Tesla dry." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Her car wasn't charging. She was complaining that my decoy was sucking her car dry when in reality, she was the one trying to suck me dry. It was the perfect self-incriminating soundbite. I clipped the audio and made it the final slide of my presentation. The night of the HOA meeting, I walked into the community clubhouse with my laptop and a small portable projector. The room was filled with about 50 of my neighbors. Karen was at the front of the room, sitting at a long table with the other board members, looking regal and composed. She was in her element, the queen in her court. She saw me walk in, and a flicker of disdain crossed her face, but she quickly replaced it with a serene smile for her voting public. She had no idea what was coming. She thought she had me cornered with her violation letter. She thought I was just another resident. She could steamroll with rules and regulations. But I wasn't just a resident. I was an engineer, and I had the receipts. The meeting was about to come to order, and I was ready to present my findings. The HOA debate night was held in our drab little community clubhouse, a room that usually smelled of stale coffee and quiet desperation. Tonight, however, it was buzzing with a nervous energy. The election was the main event. Karen Freeman sat at the head table, radiating a forced serenity. The benevolent queen preparing to accept her rightful crown for another term. She launched the meeting with her campaign speech, a masterpiece of empty platitudes. She talked about maintaining our community's aesthetic integrity, which was code for yelling at people about their trash cans. She talked about fiscal responsibility, which meant arguing over the brand of fertilizer used on the common areas. And then she hit her big theme, embracing a green future. She spoke glowingly about the importance of electric vehicles and her personal commitment to sustainable living. She even had the nerve to say, "We need to support our neighbors who are making the switch to clean energy." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing out loud. The hypocrisy was staggering. After her speech, the floor was open for questions from the homeowners. A few people asked boring questions about the budget for pool maintenance and the rules about satellite dishes. Then I stood up. "Evan Cole, 1420 Koldiak Drive," I said, my voice carrying through the quiet room. "I don't have a question. I have a presentation regarding a series of ongoing criminal acts in our community and the abuse of power by our current HOA president." A murmur went through the crowd. All eyes swiveled from me to Karen. Her serene mask cracked. A flash of pure panic showed in her eyes before she quickly composed herself. "Mr. Cole, this is not the proper forum for personal grievances," she said, her voice tight. "If you have a complaint, you can submit it in writing to the board." "Oh, I have it in writing," I said, holding up the violation letter she had sent me. "But I think the entire community deserves to see the evidence behind this complaint. It concerns everyone's safety and the integrity of this board." I didn't wait for her permission. I walked to the front of the room, set up my small projector on a table, and aimed it at the blank white wall behind the board members. The room was silent, all 50 pairs of eyes on me. As many of you know, I own an electric vehicle. I began clicking the first slide into view. It was a simple photo of my house and my charger. I installed this charger myself, fully permitted and inspected. It is my private property running on my private electricity. I clicked to the next slide. It was a still frame from the first video showing Karen's white Tesla plugged into my charger in the dead of night. However, for the past several weeks, this private property has been repeatedly used without my permission by another resident. That resident is our HOA president, Karen Freeman. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen shot to her feet. "This is an outrage. It's slander. You have no proof." "On the contrary," I said calmly, "I have a great deal of proof." And then I let the evidence speak for itself. I played the first video clip, the one where I politely asked her to stop. The whole room heard her flimsy excuse about her charger being on the fritz. Next, I showed the photo of the big red tag stop work order on her own illegal charger installation. The murmurs in the room grew louder. I then played the damning video of her returning with the latch tool, her smug grin illuminated by her flashlight as she picked the dummy lock and trespassed on my property to steal from me again. "This wasn't a one-time mistake," I narrated, my voice cold and factual. "This was a deliberate, repeated act." I put up the charts showing the dates, times, and kilowatts. I explained in simple terms how my decoy system worked, emphasizing that it was completely harmless and designed only to log the theft. Then came the glitter bomb video. When the buzzer shrieked and the glitter cloud erupted, the room erupted with it. People weren't just gasping anymore. They were laughing, openly laughing at her. The sight of the perfectly coiffed HOA president being coated in purple sparkles was too much for them to resist. Karen's face was a mottled mess of red and white. She looked like she was going to explode. But I wasn't done. I showed them the video of her brother-in-law shoving me in my own garage. I held up the police incident report number. When theft and humiliation didn't work, she resorted to physical intimidation. Finally, I displayed the violation letter she had sent me, accusing me of breaking every rules she was flouting. "This is an abuse of power," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. "She used her position as president to try and silence and punish the victim of her own crimes." I let that sink in for a moment. The room was dead silent. The mood had shifted from amusement to anger. These people might bicker about lawn ornaments, but they understood the difference between right and wrong. They understood what an abuse of power looked like. "And now for my final exhibit," I said, clicking to the last slide. I want to play you a short audio clip recorded by my security camera. This is the sound of our HOA president complaining into her phone while she is actively stealing electricity from a neighbor. I hit play. Karen's whiny, entitled voice filled the room. I don't know what's wrong with this thing. It says it's charging, but my battery level is barely moving. It feels like you're sucking my Tesla dry. For a second, there was stunned silence as the words hung in the air. Then someone in the back started to laugh. A deep belly laugh. Another person joined in, then another, until the entire room was roaring with laughter. The sheer, unadulterated irony was too perfect. She was the one sucking my Tesla dry, metaphorically speaking, and she was complaining about it. It was the most perfect self-inflicted wound I had ever witnessed. Karen Freeman just stood there, her face ashen, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. She had been exposed, ridiculed, and defeated. Her image, the only thing she truly cared about, had been shattered into a million sparkling pieces in front of the very people she so desperately wanted to rule. The laughter was the sound of her reign coming to a swift and decisive end. The laughter in that clubhouse was more than just amusement. It was a verdict. It was the sound of a community collectively realizing their leader was a fraud. The debate was over. Karen didn't say another word. She sank back into her chair, her face a pale, slack mask of defeat. The other board members looked horrified, shuffling their papers and refusing to make eye contact with her. The moderator, a flustered L-looking accountant named George, cleared his throat and tried to regain control. Well, thank you, Mr. Cole. We will now proceed to the vote for HOA president. It was a formality. The ballots were passed out, and the result was a foregone conclusion. When George read the tally a few minutes later, it was a landslide. Karen's opponent, a quiet retired school teacher named Martha, won with over 90% of the vote. Karen didn't even have the support of her own board. As soon as the result was announced, a motion was made from the floor by one of my neighbors to formally censure Karen Freeman for her actions and to rescind the violation notice against me. It passed unanimously. The board, now under Martha's new leadership, looked relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted. They wanted to distance themselves from Karen's toxicity as quickly as possible. The final piece of business that night was perhaps the most satisfying. Martha, in her first act as president, proposed an emergency amendment to the HOA bylaws. She called it the Private Property Integrity Act. It was a simple, clear bylaw that explicitly stated that personal property, including but not limited to vehicles and their associated charging equipment located on a homeowner's private deed property, was not subject to common use. It further stated that any unauthorized use of such equipment would be considered trespassing and theft, and the HOA would support any homeowner who pursued legal action against an offender. It was in essence the Karen Freeman bylaw. It passed again with a unanimous vote. In the space of 30 minutes, I had not only defended myself, but had also fundamentally changed the rules of our community to protect everyone from a predator like her. The system had worked. Justice served up on a projector screen had been swift and absolute. After the meeting, I was surrounded by neighbors. They clapped me on the back, shook my hand, and thanked me for speaking up. Many of them had their own stories of Karen's petty tyranny. Fines for holiday decorations left up a day too late. Nasty notes about weeds no one could see. They had all been too intimidated to fight back alone. Seeing her taken down so publicly was a catharsis for the whole neighborhood. I packed up my projector, feeling a profound sense of relief. It was over. I had faced the bully, not with fists or fury, but with facts and logic. I had protected my home, my wife, and my principles. Sarah and I walked home in the cool night air. She squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You did the right thing. You were methodical. You were prepared. And you let her hang herself with her own rope." "I had a good emotional anchor," I said, smiling at her. The line between law and revenge had been my central question throughout this whole ordeal, and I felt like I had found the answer. Revenge is emotional and chaotic. Justice is methodical and documented. I had sought justice, and the petty theatrical elements, the glitter, the buzzer, were just the seasoning on the main course. They were the punchline to a very serious joke. The next day, the old HOA board, in its last official act before the new board took over, sent Karen a letter. It mandated that she pay me full restitution for the estimated electricity she had attempted to steal, calculated from my data logs. The amount was a paltry $73.44, but it was never about the money. It was about the accountability. A check arrived in my mailbox a week later with no note, no apology, just a check with her signature on it. It was the final receipt, the final admission of guilt. The community had been reset. The Queen was deposed and a new, fairer era had begun. My quiet cul-de-sac felt quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the silence of apathy, it was the silence of peace. The system was back in balance, and my little corner of the world once again made sense. In the weeks after debate night, our neighborhood finally breathed. Queen Karen was done. Her white Tesla still slid in and out, but she never met my eyes. The lawn that once looked like a magazine cover grew a few brown scars. Power shifted. She wasn't the ruler now. She was the neighbor who got glitter-bombed for stealing. Martha took the HOA chair, and the tone flipped fast. Newsletters traded threats for potlucks. Fewer fines, more see a Saturday. My life slid back into a clean rhythm. The decoy box stayed on my wall. I thought about taking it down. Sarah shook her head. Leave it. It's a monument. She was right. It sat there like a quiet guardrail. Simple rules, clear logic. A check came in the mail. $73.44 restitution. I stared at it. Didn't want her money mixed with mine, so I turned it into a lesson. I ordered a small trophy. Chrome EV, handle on marble with 2 words on the brass plate. Energy restored. I hung it over my bench. Every time I looked up, I smiled. Not anger, ingenuity. Buddy Larry swung by with a six-pack and cackled at the plaque. We clinked bottles in the garage and admired our boring, beautiful box. It wasn't revenge to us, it was design, a system that says no without a shout. Then came the last picture, the one I didn't plan. Taking out the trash one night, I saw her by the driveway. The illegal charger was gone. The wall patch was rough and bright. In her hand, a long orange extension cord, the cheap kind for leaf blowers. She fed it across perfect grass and through a cracked window. Trickle charge, 2, maybe 3 days for a full battery. The green future leader charging like a camper on a rainy day. She felt me watching. Her face hardened, then softened. The fight fell out of her. She turned, went inside, and left the cord sagging between house and car like a sad kite string. I didn't gloat. I didn't wave. I just went back to my garage, hung my own cable on its hook, and glanced up at the trophy. The street was quiet. The system held. It wasn't the size of the check. It was the fact that the board changed, the rule changed, and the behavior changed. People ask about the line between law and revenge. To me, it's simple now. Revenge is loud and sloppy. Law is quiet and logged. You build the right circuit. You show the tape. You let the current flow where it should, and stop it where it shouldn't. Out in front, the orange cord glowed under a porch light. In my garage, the plaque caught a bit of the same glow. Energy restored. Peace too. If anyone forgets, the box is still there. The sign is still there. And the camera still blinks its little red dot.